You have already decided how today will go. Not consciously, not with words, but somewhere beneath your awareness, in the first 4 seconds after you opened your eyes this morning, your brain made a prediction about your entire day, and you believed it without question. That prediction is running right now, silently, invisibly, shaping every decision you're about to make before you've even made it. Here is the disturbing part. Most people will live their entire lives without ever discovering that their mind is not reporting reality to them. It is manufacturing it. Every thought you call realistic, every worry you call just being cautious, every doubt you call logical. None of it is neutral. It was built, assembled, trained into you by 10,000 mornings just like this one. And the version of you that wakes up defeated before the day begins? That's not who you are. That's who you were trained to become. So let me ask you something you probably haven't asked yourself in years. If your mind is a machine that produces whatever you feed it, what exactly have you been feeding it? Because here's the truth neuroscience has confirmed again and again, and it should terrify you a little. The brain does not distinguish between a threat that is real and a threat that is imagined. When you replay an argument from yesterday, your nervous system reacts as if it's happening right now. When you rehearse failure before you've even tried, your body prepares for defeat as though it already occurred. You are not remembering your fears. You are rehearsing them, daily, faithfully, like a prayer you never meant to say. And the cruelest part of this entire mechanism is that it feels like protection. It feels responsible. It feels like realism. But ask yourself honestly, has catastrophizing ever once made you stronger? Has assuming the worst ever once prepared you for anything except more suffering? There is a reason ancient Stoic philosophers, 2,000 years before neuroscience had a name for any of this, arrived at the exact same conclusion sitting in stone courtyards with nothing but candlelight and discipline. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself, not to an audience, not for fame, but in private, in the dark, that the soul becomes the color of its thoughts. Let that sit with you for a moment. The soul becomes the color of its thoughts, not the color of your circumstances, not the color of what happened to you, the color of what you kept thinking on repeat, morning after morning, until it became the lens you saw everything through. This is where most people get it wrong. They believe positivity is about denial, about pretending the storm isn't there, about slapping a smile over pain and calling it healing. That is not positivity. That is avoidance wearing a costume. Real positivity, the kind that transforms a life instead of decorating it, is not the absence of darkness. It is the decision to become the source of light inside the darkness, because you have realized something most people never do. You cannot control what happens to you, but you have absolute, unshakable authority over what you decide it means. That single shift, the meaning you assign, not the event itself, is the exact fault line between people who break under pressure and people who are forged by it. Same divorce, same diagnosis, same financial collapse, same betrayal. Two people can live the identical nightmare, and one becomes bitter for the rest of their life while the other becomes unrecognizable in their strength. What separates them isn't luck. It's interpretation. And interpretation is trainable. Right now, somewhere in your body, there is a version of you who already knows this. A version who has felt, even just once, what it's like to wake up and feel unstoppable. Maybe it was the morning after you finally made the decision you'd been avoiding for months. Maybe it was the day you stood in front of something terrifying and did it anyway, and felt your own hands stop shaking halfway through. That feeling wasn't random. It was chemical, dopamine and serotonin, flooding a brain that finally believed it was capable. And here is what almost nobody tells you, that state is not reserved for special days. It is not something that only visits you when life is kind. It is a state you can manufacture, on command, starting the moment you open your eyes. But most people never learn how because they were taught the wrong starting point. They were taught to wait for motivation, to wait until they feel ready, to wait for confidence to arrive before they take the first step. This is backwards. This has always been backwards. Confidence is not the cause of action. Confidence is the consequence of action. You do not think your way into a new identity. You act your way into one uncomfortable decision at a time, until your brain has no choice but to update its evidence file on who you are. So ask yourself honestly, right now, what evidence have you been collecting? Every time you hit snooze instead of rising, you cast a vote for the identity of someone who breaks promises to themselves. Every time you scroll instead of starting, you cast a vote for someone who chooses comfort over growth. And here is the part that should genuinely unsettle you. Your brain is always counting the votes. It does not care what you say you want. It only believes what you repeatedly do. This is why willpower alone fails so many people, because they are trying to override years of accumulated evidence with a single burst of emotion that fades by lunchtime. Transformation isn't a single decision. It's a pattern of small, boring, unglamorous decisions, repeated until they become unconscious. Until positivity is no longer something you have to try to feel. It becomes the default setting of a mind you rebuilt on purpose. And this is where the story shifts, because I need you to understand something that most motivational content will never tell you. Positivity is not soft. Positivity, done correctly, is one of the most disciplined, most demanding, most courageous acts a human being can perform, because it requires you to look directly at pain, at fear, at uncertainty, at every legitimate reason you have to give up, and choose meaning anyway. That is not naivety. That is warfare against your own worst instincts, fought quietly, every single morning, where no one is watching and no one will ever know how hard the battle really was. Viktor Frankl wrote about this after surviving one of the darkest chapters in human history, that everything can be taken from a person except one final freedom, the freedom to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. If a man could find meaning inside a concentration camp, what exactly is your excuse? Sit with that question. Do not rush past it. Because I suspect, if you're honest with yourself, the real obstacle in your life was never as large as you've been telling yourself it is. The obstacle was the story that you're too late, the story that you tried before and it didn't work, so it will never work, the story that other people were simply born luckier, born stronger, born more capable, while you were somehow left out of the equation. That story is a lie your fear told you to keep you safe. And safety, disguised as comfort, has quietly stolen more dreams than failure ever has. So here is the moment where everything changes, not tomorrow, not next Monday, not after some imaginary version of you finally figures it out. Right now, in this exact second, while these words are still moving through your mind, you get to decide what kind of morning this is going to be. Not because the circumstances have changed. They probably haven't. The bills are still there. The uncertainty is still there. The people who doubted you are still exactly where you left them. Nothing external has shifted, but something internal just did. Because now you know the truth that changes everything. Your mind was never broken. It was simply following instructions you gave it without realizing you were giving them. Which means the same mechanism that built your fear can build your strength. The same repetition that convinced you that you weren't enough can convince you, with equal power, that you are exactly enough right now, unfinished and imperfect and still worthy of an extraordinary life. This is the part where most videos tell you to believe in yourself, and leave you exactly where you started, armed with nothing but a feeling that fades by tomorrow morning. I am not going to do that to you. Instead, I am going to tell you what belief actually requires, because belief without action is just a beautifully decorated form of denial. It requires you to rise today, not when you feel like it, but especially when you don't, because that single act of defiance against your own resistance is the first vote for a new identity. It requires you to speak to yourself the way you would speak to someone you are trying to save, because you are trying to save the version of you that almost gave up. The version that almost believed the story. The version that came dangerously close to settling for a smaller life because the bigger one felt too uncertain, too far, too risky. That version of you is still in there. And they are listening to every word you say to yourself right now. So choose those words like a life depends on it. Because it does. Somewhere out there is a version of your life 5 years from now that is either the direct result of the thoughts you are choosing today, or the direct result of the thoughts you allowed to choose you. There is no neutral option. There never was. You are either building the mind that builds the life you want, or you are letting old patterns build a life you'll spend years trying to escape. The sun does not rise because it feels motivated to. It rises because that is simply what it does. Without apology. Without asking permission. Without waiting for the storm clouds to clear first. Be that today. Not because someone told you to. Not because a video convinced you for 20 minutes and the feeling will fade by breakfast. But because somewhere inside you, in the quiet place beneath all the noise and doubt and old evidence, there is a version of you who has been waiting patiently for a long time to finally be let out. Stop making them wait. Rise not because the world has become easier, but because you have decided in this exact moment that you are no longer willing to be the person who waits for permission to become who you were always capable of being. The mind that was your prison can become your power. The morning that once defeated you can become the moment you were forged. And the story you've been telling yourself, the one where you're not ready, not strong enough, not far enough along, ends now. Because the version of you who rises today, who chooses meaning over fear, who casts one small vote after another until belief becomes evidence and evidence becomes identity, that person does not need permission. That person is already becoming unstoppable. And it starts the instant you decide to stand up. So stand up.